welcome to the Crimson Stitchery, a video channel about making all things that are beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka and you can find me elsewhere online as A Sour Telling, that's A Sour Telling, and that's my username on Instagram and on Ravelry as well. And on Ravelry we also have a Ravelry group for the podcast. Do click on the down bar here on YouTube below where you'll find show notes for this episode and any links and any more details about anything that I mentioned too. In this episode I'll share with you quite a bit of knitting, no mending again for this episode, and have another little chat to you at the end around some ideas about things that we can do to stay positive, stay up as much as we can in our lives, continuing the theme that I brought up in last fortnight's episode about Mental Health Awareness Month. Let's start with Into the Wardrobe. I'm again continuing what I started last week about Me Made May with another Me Made outfit, and this is the kind of thing that I wear all the time in the summer. So it's now mid-May, very much into May, and the weather is constantly up and down, like one moment it's boiling hot in the sunshine, the next minute it's back to freezing cold and the heating switched itself on, and I'm wearing woolly jumpers, so who knows, but at the moment indoors in my flat it's fairly mild. So I'm wearing a hand knit top and a pair of handmade trousers. So the trousers, let's start with, are an adaptation of a trouser pattern from a Japanese sewing book, but I made so many changes. They very, very loosely resemble the original. And they're made out of 100% linen, so they look a little bit wrinkly, but they've got this lovely pinstripe in pale blue and white, and they are my go-to trousers in the summer. I made a second version, but I made the mistake of trying to make them slightly less voluminous and a bit more fitted, and they're a little bit too fitted now. And then the top that I'm wearing is a hand knitted one. This is the little vest that I did wear in the videos that I released last week, where I released a 2-part tutorial about working with yarn called Holst Super Soft. So if you're interested in that product and you have some questions about it, it's a great resource to go and check out not only the video but also the many detailed comments that people have left below. So this top, come a bit closer, is a lovely little thing. It's made out of this white bamboo and cotton, so it's got a lovely drape and movement, which you can see on the camera, and it's got a seed stitch portion up here, a square neckline. It's finished off with vintage small plastic buttons. The same on the back, with the seed stitch and stocking stitch, and it's got a chunky little seed stitch hem as well. And this was knitted from a back issue of Rowan magazine, Rowan 31, which is over 10 years old, and when I bought this it was actually already a back issue, because Rowan was doing this deal where you could do a lucky dip of back issues for very, very little money. You could get 4 magazines for probably about £10, £15, hardly anything at all when you consider that the magazines have such a wealth of patterns. So they're a little bit out of date, but actually in the style of Rowan it's actually very, very classic, and although some of the photography and styling is a little bit out of date, the patterns themselves are fairly timeless. So this pattern is Gracie, and there's this lovely lady walking down the street, and in the pattern it's knit in 100% cotton, in a Rowan 4-ply weight, fingering weight cotton that's quite tightly spun, that's quite tightly plied, whereas I made it using King Cole bamboo cotton, which was a lot cheaper. I think that's probably why I picked it, but unfortunately it has the tendency to grow. So this top actually starts off much more modestly and much more kind of scooped in and fitted to my body, and then as the day goes by it starts to drop. The neckline starts to drop and drop and drop, and then just everything kind of starts to expand, which the first couple of times it did it I got super worried, and it made me feel really anxious, because I don't have any problem with low cut top, low cut armholes, nothing like that. I'm very much a free the nipple kind of girl. Probably wouldn't do it on social media myself, but I'm really against the fact that women's nipples are overtly sexualized, whereas men's aren't. I think it's really a remnant of sexism that just needs to go away, and we need to stop over sexualizing women's bodies, full stop, and just, you know, let women go about their life, you know, braless or wearing a bra or whatever, showing their cleavage without feeling worried about being hassled or harassed by men on the street, or being policed by other women telling them that they need to, you know, dress less skimpily. So yeah, I'm all about free the nipple. So it's not that worries me. It just kind of, I think the first time it happened, I was just like, it started here, you know, a good, you know, inch and a half above where it currently is, and it just started to drop and drop and drop and drop, and I was like, when is this gonna end? But luckily, you know, I've been wearing this top for over a year and a half now, and I've discovered that actually the expansion of the cotton bamboo, it does have a limit. It does come to an end. It just kind of grows out and expands and drops to what it wants to be, and then it just stays there. And as it expands, it actually gets really much looser and drapier, so it's an absolutely delightful garment to wear. And every time that I wash it in the washing machine, I actually wash this on a 60-degree wash with, you know, a full spin the first time, trying to actively shrink it up, but every time I put it in the washing machine, it just shrinks back up, and then when I wear it, I think the weight of the fabric making the garment drop, and then the warmth of my body just kind of makes it start to expand. So that's that. But as I said, I'm quite used to it now, and regardless of that, I really enjoy wearing it. And it's so nice having some hand knit kind of basics to wear during the summer as well, so that knitting can just carry on being a part of my everyday wardrobe. So yeah, that's that. On to knitting, and I have a finished object. This is a lovely little grey beret that I made out of a fingering weight merino yarn, beautiful merino by Rosie Greenwell, and it's got this wonderful elasticity and memory to the fabric. It's super soft. It's this lovely faded little mousy grey. So I made a beret, and then on the inside I've just got a little label that I sewed in that says handmade by Anushka. And I made this a little while ago for my auntie because it's her birthday, and my auntie is incredibly knitworthy. I've made so much for her over the years. Very tragically, a few years ago her house got flooded and actually pretty much destroyed one of the rooms internally, which included a closet with most of the things that I had knitted her, you know, hats, scarves, gloves. It was all just hanging up in the closet, and it actually got flooded and destroyed, which was totally tragic. So I have been over the years, you know, restarting to knit things for her again and give them away to her. And I know that she would love me to knit her like a pair of hot pants or a little top, probably something similar to this but in black. Sorry, you're just getting a hat. So it's a little beret. And it sits quite nicely, and I made it with some shaping, so it's not actually the shape of it, you know, like a dinner plate. It wasn't knit like that. It was actually knit with a bit more contouring in mind, so it sits just really lovely on the head. It's really cute. It's got this little I-cord little knot at the end. So yeah, that's that. And then, really excitingly, it's got a removable pom-pom as well, which turns it into a bit more of a tam o' shanter. And this is absolutely divine, this pom-pom. Let me tell you a little bit more about it. This is a pom-pom from Toft Alpaca, and I was informed that it is an ethical fur pom-pom in that it's made from the pelts of baby alpacas who have died naturally rather than have been culled for the fur industry kind of on purpose. So obviously I know that fur is quite a divisive subject. Personally, I actually don't have a problem with wearing fur because I eat meat and I wear leather, and contrary to many people's beliefs or assumptions, leather is not a byproduct of the meat industry. It's not. by and large it is not. So the fact that I wear leather shoes and have leather bags, you know, it would kind of be a bit rich if I was super against the fur trade. Having said that, this is the first time that I've ever purchased something that was new fur. I do own a few vintage fur coats and stoles, and I think it's much better to continue wearing vintage fur, you know, an animal that died a very long time ago, rather than see it destroyed. I also see wearing old fur and other natural, you know, animal or plant-based fibres as an ethical and environmental option compared to using synthetic fibres derived from petrol-based chemicals. So it's a minefield, it's really an ethical minefield, and everybody just has to do what they want. Going back to the ethical pom-pom, I showed this and I showed the website to my friend who has studied the use of fur in culture. It's what she did her master's degree in. And she was extremely skeptical because she said that there's not really, according to her, there's not an internationally recognised awarding body for ethical fur. So her concern was, you know, they could just be lying. What would they do in a year where no baby alpacas died naturally? Would they just, you know, cull them anyway to produce their pelts? So it's a really tricky thing, and everybody's just got to make their own mind up and, you know, make decisions based on what they're comfortable with. I don't think it's my place to police anyone's decisions, if I'm honest with you. And like I said, I feel that it's okay to wear fur, especially secondhand fur and animal products, whereas I've got very strong views against synthetic materials. Whereas like with my friend, who was one of my best friends, you know, she's never thrown a bottle of ketchup on me or, you know, broken into my wardrobe and destroyed my fur coat. We've got opposing views, we're still friends. And she would say the same thing, like I know that she's quite against like the violent demonstration methods that do exist because it's so complicated, you know, there's so many different factors to take into account. So anyway, here's my fur pom-pom. It's undyed and it's kind of this brownish black that reminds me of the colour that a black cat would get if it was sunbathing, when the black fur just goes all browny and kind of golden and faded, and it almost looks like sepia as well. So this is a present for my auntie. I think she's going to love it. She's going to love the pom-pom. You know, she's gonna just she's gonna scream with joy, I think. So I can't wait to give it to her. Finished object number 1. The vintage Shetland spring cal is still happening over on Instagram using the hashtag vintage Shetland spring cal, but also in our Ravelry group where we have a discussion thread. And I have actually finished knitting on my project, on my Jameson tunic, but I'm not displaying it as a finished object today because it's got so many loose ends that need to be woven in. And it needs a blocking, so it's inside out here because it's not quite ready. But yeah, I've actually finished making this, so I'm quite delighted to announce that. Almost finished, so hopefully next time that I podcast it will be done. And someone commented online saying, oh, that was such a speedy knit, you know, you knit so fast. And I thought that was really interesting actually, because I'm following quite a few of the other knitters who are taking part in this knit along on Instagram, and obviously their projects pop up on my feed, and also the hashtag I'm following on Instagram, so when other people use the hashtag I get to see that as well. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, you know, I started this at the beginning of March and it's now middle of May, so you know that's a good 2.5 months. But also this is the only sweater that I've been knitting in that time, whereas the other knitters I've seen like this cast on, that cast on, this project, that project, you know, which again, like, I'm not policing anybody, but it's all I mean to say is that if you're working on like 5 different sweater projects all at once, it's probably going to be unlikely that you're going to finish them all immediately in a very short time frame, because you can only, you know, knit so much with your own 2 hands at some point. So yeah, that's what I'll say. I'm not the type of person that has multiple projects going on at once. So yeah, this one is finished now, and I will tell you a little bit more about it next week. But as I said, the weather is very up and down at the moment, and who knows, you know, it could be back to 5 degrees next week and I could be quite gladly wearing a 100% wool jumper. So I cast off of these sleeves and haven't started weaving in the ends yet, but I'll get to that at some point over the next few days. And as soon as I cast off the sleeve, I knew that I wanted to cast on something new. So as I mentioned earlier, I made those videos about knitting with Whole Super Soft, and I've got 2 swatches here, and I discuss the 2 swatches in quite a lot of detail on my videos, so do check those out if you're interested in much more detail about Whole Super Soft. So what pattern am I going to be knitting? I have decided to make Magnolia by Camilla Vard. I have loved this pattern ever since it was published in Lane magazine, and I've had 2 ladies in my knitting group that have since knit one, and I was so torn because I never knew what colour I wanted to make. I absolutely loved the warm grey of the original, but I really didn't want a big oversized grey jumper because in the winter I just tend to find that a little bit depressing. You know, everything is very dark anyway, and most winter clothing is dark too, whereas summer clothing is light and colourful, typically, at least in the UK. So I knew that I wanted a bright colour and I just couldn't decide what it was. And then I had purchased a large cone of Whole Super Soft as a total impulse buy in their Black Friday sale, intending to make a shawl from it. And then in the end I thought, actually, let's hold it double and make the Magnolia, because then I'll have this really, really cheery, comfortable, warm and light garment with that gorgeous lace panel on the bottom. So I've cast that on, and in the video I mentioned I was planning on using a larger needle and knitting a Whole Super Soft double at a tension of 16 stitches, but the Magnolia pattern's actually 20 stitches per 4 inch. And I had knit a swatch with 5mm needles and achieved a gauge of 19 stitches per 4 inch, and I decided that that was enough. I wasn't going to go down another needle size, so I decided to stick to that and knit a kind of fudge between 2 sizes. So because my stitch gauge was slightly looser, 19 stitches instead of 20, and also I knew from my swatching experiment in the video that the fabric was actually going to shrink up in length. So I've decided to knit the width of the smallest size, which will end up being slightly bigger because my gauge is a little bit looser, and then the length of the size up from that, so that after I wash it, it will just, you know, shrink up a little bit and be a bit more suitable. So yeah, I've made a good start on the yoke. That was quite fun, very straightforward. You kind of cast on with loads of enthusiasm and kind of knit round doing the increases. So it started to slow down now, just as I approach the end of the yoke and get ready to split for the body. So that's quite suitable. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to having that. So although I'm going to have 2 reddish winter jumpers, they'll be quite different because this one is a very loose fitting tunic, and it's made from a worsted spun yarn, so it's really smooth and slick, whereas this one, you know, it comes up higher in the neck, the sleeves are going to be much more fitted, and also it's a woolen spun yarn, so it's going to be fuzzier and lighter and a bit airier. So yeah, they're kind of similar but different, but either way I'll be quite happy at introducing some more red tones into my wardrobe for the winter. And then the last thing that I've been working on is another pattern from this issue of Rowan magazine, and it's a design by Kim Hargreaves called Flame, and she's done what she does quite a lot for Rowan magazine, in that she'll do a pattern and she'll offer several different iterations of the pattern. So she has one called Flame, which she's offered as a one-shoulder vest with a huge long ribbing up the body. She's offered as a sleeveless cowl tank top, and also jumper by the looks of it, and then she's offered as this as a little vest which has got tie shoulders on it. And I'm knitting it in the same yarn as I did this little top in, which is King Cole Bamboo Cotton 4-ply, 48% bamboo viscose, 52% cotton, this time in black. And you can see I've broken my rule about only having one garment whip on the needles at once, and that's because this is black, as you can see, so I can only work on it in daylight or in really excellent lighting, so that's absolutely fine. And yeah, it's knitted in pieces, there's not very much to see yet, and I decided to cast this on after watching Stitching Over the Days with Constance, who I mentioned in my last video, because she's going to be hosting a Kim Hargreaves along, so I decided to join in on that early. And yeah, I had originally intended this black yarn to be a different pattern, a different kind of knitted tank top pattern from the back issue of Pom Pom, which had a very lacy open back. I can't remember what it's called, so I'll just pop a link to it down below. But that pattern I discovered was actually knit in the round, and knowing what I did about the properties of this bamboo cotton yarn, that it was going to grow and change, I just knew that that would be a terrible idea, because without seams down the side, there's just no limit to how the garment can just kind of continue expanding. I just felt like if there were seams there, it would just expand up to a certain point and then it would have to stop. So yeah, instead I'm just doing this very simple, slightly blousy tank top, which has got knots on the shoulders, and I will get my other half to teach me how to do a really nice figure of 8 knot with the straps. And also that's kind of good, because if it just stretches down too much, I can always just undo the knot and re-tie it and change that. But as I was recording this, I just suddenly thought, actually there's nothing stopping me from changing the pattern of the back of this tank, so I could just go into one of my stitch dictionaries and pick a lace pattern and just knit the back with that anyway. So I'm definitely going to consider that, because it could be really fun to have the lace and the knots, yeah, and just kind of have that flash of skin at the back there in black, so it's kind of chic and classic, but you know, a little bit spicy as well, because as we've established, I'm very comfortable in my own skin. Basically my goal for the summer is to wear as few clothing as possible and, you know, get as much exposure to sunlight as I can. So yeah, that's all my knitting. I also have my sock pattern whip, which I haven't done any work on, just haven't been feeling it, and it's been really nice to get some more garments going on the needles for my wardrobe too. Conversational threads. So yeah, no mending this week, let's get straight into it. And I'd like to draw your attention to these glorious roses that I got from my grandparents. They are master gardeners, and I learnt nearly everything I knew off them, and a little bit off the telly as well. And yeah, they're just beautiful. They smell fresh, not too heavily perfumed, but they are absolutely stunning and much, much, much more beautiful than anything you could ever buy in the shop. So lovely to have these here. I'm still waiting for all of my roses at home to bloom. I'm just sitting there staring at the bugs and, you know, spraying the aphids off with dish soap and waiting, and they still haven't bloomed. I feel like I've been waiting for at least 3 weeks now. And you know, they say watch pot never boils, and that's what it's basically like with gardening as well. Like the moment I ignore it or go away somewhere and spend no time at home, probably all the flowers will just suddenly pop open. So annoying. So continuing on the theme of what I raised last video about Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to ask you, what is it you do to put yourself in better health mentally? What is it that you do to make yourself feel better? Now you could call this self-care, but I am a little bit ambivalent about the phrase self-care, because it gets to a point where it's become very commercialized by, you know, companies and brands, and self-care just becomes about like having a bubble bath, which obviously sometimes it is, because it is about taking time to make sure that you're on form and feeling good in yourself, so that you're prepared to, you know, meet the challenges and difficulties that you face in daily life anyway. But like I said, I just think it's been like far too co-opted by this, like, spend loads of money on a bubble bath or a luxury spa retreat kind of thing. So rather than self-care, just like, what are the things that you do? So the reason that I'm asking this is because about 18 months ago I had a fall. I fell down the stairs. I fell down the stairs at a gig. It was backstage, it was really dark. It was actually just before the gig, and this is a gig that I was performing at. So it was really, really worrying. I fell down the stairs after the sound check because I was rushing around really stressed because some equipment was lost, and I just slipped. I was not wearing my stage costume and, you know, my stage shoes with massive platforms. I was actually wearing a pair of brogues with rubber soles that had really great grip, but somehow I, you know, ran down a very short flight of stairs, about less than 10 steps. I slipped down, and as I slipped down I put my hands out as a reflex to stop me, and they slammed onto the surface of whatever it was. So whilst my feet and ankles were okay, I actually ended up injuring my left hand really quite badly. It immediately swelled up and went slightly blue. Now I was about to play a gig, so obviously I had loads of adrenaline going on. I iced it a little bit, but I did get on stage and I did play about half an hour set on the keys, sung, stayed out all night. The next day we had to travel home. It was quite a long journey. And then the day after that, I had to go to work in the morning. So as soon as I had finished working, I went into a walk-in clinic where I was seen by a really fantastic nurse and got an x-ray, and the nurse looked the other way after she showed me the x-ray, and so I was able to take this picture of my left hand. So thankfully there were no fractures, it was just a lot of swelling and bruising, and there was nothing I could do apart from ice it, you know, on and off and strap it up in a wrist splint which she gave me. So wonderful treatment from the NHS, thank you very much. About 5 months later, I was working very, very hard towards a music assessment, practicing more than 2 hours a day quite intensively, and I was knitting and I was, you know, studying for my postgraduate degree, and I began to experience really bad joint pain in my right hand. My immediate reaction was, is it because I've been practicing too much piano? Is it because I've been knitting too much? Or is it as a recurring, you know, long-term effect of this swelling and bruising that I'd had after my fall? So I went to my GP and I said, you know, oh, I had this fall and da-da-da, and I had this x-ray and there was nothing broken, but I'm still experiencing a lot of joint pain. Do you think it could be related? And she was quite dismissive because she was like, oh, but you said you hurt your left hand and now your right hand hurts. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know. My left hand was a lot worse than my right hand, but both hands were actually really super bruised. And you know, when I say bruised, I mean it, like my whole palm was black and blue. Ice and arnica, that was what solved it. But anyway, back to this moment. And because, you know, I had had the fall and I also had Dr. Internet to assess me at the beginning, I had, you know, what's the first thing that happens when you Google joint pain? You get like, could it be carpal tunnel syndrome or tendinitis? So I'd convinced myself that if it wasn't a recurring symptom, if it wasn't some kind of recurring effect of falling over and having just like a really bad, you know, impact, then maybe it was carpal tunnel syndrome. But she just sent me for a blood test, which I was really confused about. But she then explained that rheumatoid arthritis has symptoms which show themselves in women from their late 20s onwards, which to me was really shocking. I had no idea that this condition could start so early. Now obviously there are different types of arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. But arthritis is just something that we associate with people who are, you know, middle-aged, for want of a better word, in your 40s, 50s, 60s or older, certainly not in your 20s. So I went for a blood test and then I went back to the GP a few weeks later, and thankfully I did not have rheumatoid arthritis. Hooray, what a relief. I also didn't have carpal tunnel syndrome. What I actually had was a vitamin D deficiency. I was so surprised because this sounds like something which is so benign, but the side effects of having a vitamin D deficiency are quite severe, and I was actually showing quite a lot of them. So joint pain is a really big one, your hair falling out is another one, depression is another one, and so is insomnia, not being able to sleep, and exhaustion. And I was suffering from all of this. And it all just completely made sense. So the treatment was super easy. I just had to go on a really high dose of vitamin D for a month, and then now I have to take supplements all the time. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is just to reiterate the importance of checking in on your health, and also checking in on your health with a registered medical practitioner, with someone that can give you some real advice. Because like I said, if I had just carried on the internet, I would have been convinced that I had carpal tunnel syndrome, and who knows how I would have proceeded, when actually what I had was something that was, you know, much more benign and certainly required non-invasive treatment. So I've mentioned this to quite a few people, and people are often quite dismissive when I say that I had a really severe vitamin D deficiency, because people tend to say, oh, you live in Northern Europe, in the UK, everybody's got a vitamin D deficiency. Everybody's just a bit depressed in the winter because of a vitamin D deficiency. Yes, that's probably true, but my levels were so low as to, you know, result in my hair falling out and my joints aching. In only my mid-20s. So to me that really wasn't very acceptable. I think this all happened when I was like 26. So yeah, a little while ago now, but something that I always bear in mind. And if you look at what our lifestyles are today, I do think that on the whole, we are indoors more and more and more, and especially when we're doing, you know, our favourite hobby and craft, which is knitting. It's a very indoor activity. And I've had to actively make some changes in my lifestyle because I don't just want to, you know, take supplements, which is what I do, but I actually wanted to kind of actively make myself feel better. So all of the physical symptoms that I was feeling, but also like the mental symptoms, you know, the low mood, the depression, the you know, to the lowered immune system. Like I kept getting sick. I was really limited in what I could do physically. You know, I was getting really down for various different reasons, as well as having other stuff going on in my personal life, which I'm not going to get into. But just something simple like taking more vitamin D and getting more sunlight and sunshine has actually made me feel healthier. It has made me better. And you know, obviously I am not a medical practitioner in any way. I'm just sharing a story and my experience. So the other thing that I started to do after I began taking some supplements was to start exercising outdoors. Now, I've got to say, I've been really reluctant to do any kind of exercise for decades, for most of my life. When I was at school, I was always, you know, the last person to finish in a race. You know, I would be finishing at the end alongside people that actually had health issues, you know, that would actually stop their, you know, physical ability to excel at PE. You know, I was down with them, and there was nothing, you know, I was otherwise healthy. And I did very, very badly in tennis. I couldn't hit the ball with the racket. I missed it every time. Like in football or hockey, we actually played hockey in my school, like I couldn't hit the ball with the foot, with the stick. Like, I've got excellent hand-eye coordination because I'm a musician, but when it comes to sports, no. I was terrible at team sports. I could never really see the point. I still can't. Why does it matter how many balls you catch? Like, I've never understood it. But as an adult, you know, I've come to realise that maybe I just don't like team sports, and that doesn't mean that, you know, I can't enjoy the benefits of exercise. So basically, over the last year, I've been totally brainwashed by one of my best friends, actually the one I mentioned earlier, the one who's like a fur, who has researched fur, who has been doing loads and loads and loads of running. So I've been brainwashed by hearing about all of the activities that she's been up to. And I've also been a little bit brainwashed online by some of the people that I follow, including a knitting podcaster, Nikki of Tea and Possibilities, who has spoken online quite a bit about the running initiatives that she has taken part in. And both my, you know, real life friend and, you know, the lady that I'm following online have been quite vocal about is you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be that good. You just have to have a go. Just go out into your local park and just have a go. And, you know, now I'm more talking about my friend than I am about Nikki of Tea and Possibilities. So hello, Nikki, and sorry, you know, if I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly. But yeah, so I was always so resistant against exercise, and yet I had developed all of these symptoms from essentially being indoors too much and not getting enough daylight. And also there's the fact that, you know, previously in my early 20s, I worked a very physically demanding job where I was literally on my feet all day, which I know is the case for many people in a variety of different professions where you're on your feet all the time, walking around. I then had a period where I commuted on bicycle. Whereas now that I've moved into a different place, I'm no longer living centrally in London enough to be able to to commute on bicycle. It's totally tragic. I love cycling, but it's the compromise that you make for home ownership. So I'm living very far out of central London now. And not only that, I mostly work at home, so I'm pretty much sedentary most of the time, either sitting on my desk, sitting at my piano, or indeed sitting on the sofa knitting. So I wasn't getting enough exercise. Again, the low mood and all of that kind of stuff, I started to put on weight. I can feel it even now. These trousers are actually cutting in. And I don't have a problem with putting on weight, you know, ideologically. It was just irritating that many of my clothes weren't fitting anymore. That's literally it. I didn't want to throw them away and buy new clothes. That's not financially feasible, and it's just not what I want to do. So anyway, long story short is I got totally brainwashed and I started jogging in the park using the Nike Run app. And I started off by downloading their guided runs, where you have a very, very enthusiastic American in your ear cheering you on and encouraging you to go. And honestly, you can go as slow as you need to go. You can go so slowly. Sometimes I run so slowly that, you know, I might as well be static. But I just have a go. And I built it up and I built it up and I built it up. And I started in, I think, August last year, August 2018, and I've been going running at least once a week until now. So that's about 9 months now. And it's honestly, and I really mean it, I was someone that resisted exercise and actually resented exercise, but was previously in a position where I had quite a physically demanding job. So I was basically getting exercise without having to go out and do exercise. And, you know, going from someone where, like, I was the last one, you know, my history with exercise and sport and running is always being the last, having everybody in the class standing there waiting, you know, checking their watches, like, why isn't she finished yet? That was me. And I've now realised that that's not what it's about. It's just about the need to use my body and be in my body to the extent that I can be. Now, obviously, I am an able-bodied person, and I have got friends who are disabled, who are physically disabled, who do not have the ability to do that. But actually, talking about one friend in particular who's disabled, she finds other ways to go out into the natural world, get some sunlight, get some sunshine, and not just stay at home all day. So, you know, I am very aware that this is probably coming through as very, like, able-bodied centric, because that is what it is, and a variety of other people are going to have other health issues, so whatever it is. So, for instance, my grandmother cannot run because of her body. Let's not go into it, it's personal to her, but what she does is she goes out every single day and she does work in her garden. She does weeding, she goes up, she goes down, you know, she's nearly 80, you know, she goes and carries huge buckets of water really, really slowly, you know, she has knee pads that she kneels down on, and she does some kind of physical interaction with the natural world, and that's really what I'm stressing. The things that we have to do, we ought to do, and sometimes we don't want to, but we do them anyway because they're going to make us feel better and they're going to make us better. And being just that little bit less sedentary, anything from 1 to 4, 5 times a week, but honestly, like, there are weeks where I, like, go out and I'll run for 5 minutes really slowly and I'll just come back in and I'll feel really rubbish because I haven't done very much and it hasn't gone very well and I'm really slow, but just doing that little tiny bit, for me, you know, going back to self-care and bubble baths, that has actually been more beneficial than any bubble bath that I've taken. Although the bubble baths are really nice and are a great muscle relaxant post-exercise. But I think the thing that I want to stress is, like, sometimes the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves, to make ourselves better, both physically, mentally and emotionally, sometimes they're not the things that we want to do, because they're the hard things and the boring things and the dull things, and, you know, the things that can bring up a whole host of bad memories I've just shared with you about exercise, but they're the things that we need to do. So that's my story. I'm very glad to say that my hands are much recovered, although I definitely don't practice the keys as much as I should, and I wish I was still practicing 2 hours a day, but you know, to be continued. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening in with me and for spending time with me here in the Crimson Stitchery. It's so nice to have such wonderful company. Thank you also to everybody who commented on my last video and weighed in with your opinions about what I should use with my alpaca silk for the crochet pattern. There were actually a lot of really strong points made about both the tunic pattern, Tummel, and the lace dress, Peas Blossom. But overwhelmingly, people were so encouraging about going with the lace dress. So I think that's what I'm going to do. You know, obviously I've got a bunch of knitting projects to be getting on with, and I'm still in this mega busy period at uni and at work, which is going to end in mid-July. Like, I just have to get to my birthday and then I'll have my birthday and I'll relax. Like, on my birthday, that day is pretty much going to be the day where I can just let go. So maybe I'll, you know, do the crochet in the summer. So yeah, thank you so much for weighing in. I'd also like to say that if you have been enjoying the Crimson Stitchery and you feel moved to support this video channel, thank you so much. There are 2 ways that you can do that. You could buy a copy of my Red Brick Socks pattern, which is available as a PDF download on Ravelry, or alternatively, you could consider sending me a tip, tipping me for making this podcast, and buying me a coffee on Ko-fi, and I will put a link to that down below. So a couple of people have bought me a coffee this week, and I did actually physically buy a coffee in a cafe, and that was absolutely lovely, because literally, you know, you bought me a coffee and I actually went and had a coffee, and I had a really nice chill and a relax and a great chat with a very good friend, and it was just so lovely. So thank you so much to people who have bought me a coffee. If you don't want to, then absolutely no pressure. It's very important to me that these videos will be freely available. That's definitely part of my initiative and my ethos, but if you would like to donate to the podcast, I would be most thankful indeed. So that's everything for the Crimson Stitchery today. There will be another podcast episode in 2 weeks. So until then, do drop me a comment below. Tell me what the things are that you do to make yourself feel better mentally, physically, emotionally. What are the things that bring you joy but also help you, you know, really harness your potential and, you know, just pull yourself together and be ready to face life no matter what all of the downs are, because, you know, when it rains it pours. I've definitely been going through that in the last few years. What are the things that we could all be doing individually or together in order to be ready to face the challenges? Thanks for watching and happy knitting. Bye bye.